Lord's Army Basic Training Module 2, Natural Revelation. This is the conscience. Let's move from the realm outside our minds and dive deep into our minds. We're all given what we call a conscience, and conscience is a Latin word. It means with knowledge. All people are born with knowledge of objective morality. We know that lying, stealing, murdering, and the like are all wrong things. We're able to look at atrocities that happen around the world and we say to ourselves, that shouldn't be. And individuals such as William Wilberforce and Martin Luther King Jr. both stood at great odds with the society of their day and stood up for that which is right, despite what the societal constructs around them dictated at the time. Therefore, these things don't originate with the society or with the legal system, but they're beyond that. I want you to imagine if you met a man and he said, I like when it's rainy outside. You may disagree with that person, but you recognize that his viewpoint is just as valid as yours. That's because the preference for one bit of weather over another is a subjective issue. In other words, it is up to the individual subject to make a claim of malediction or benediction on the topic. However, I want you to imagine that you meet another man and he says to you, I like torturing puppies to death. You'd recognize that his stated pastime is a horrible evil, and it is. You're able to discern that you don't simply prefer not torturing puppies, but rather you recognize that the act of torturing puppies for fun is inherently wrong. That is known as objective, because the merits of it are based upon the object at hand and not upon the subjects involved. This bit of knowledge regarding objective morality actually necessitates a standard from which comparison can be made. For example, if I were to give you this image and say this is an apple, then you'd go along with me because the image resembles an apple. However, if I were to give you this image and say this is an apple, then you'd assume I'd put up the wrong picture by accident. The reason is because you know what an actual apple looks like. And the same is true for morality. We're able to discern a morally good thing from a morally bad thing because there is a supreme morality or a measure that we weigh things against. If one person were to say to another, you lied to me, the person in response is not likely to give a response of, who cares whether I lied or I didn't? But rather, the person in response is far more likely to give some excuse or reason why what that person said wasn't actually a lie. It's because we all know inherently that lying is wrong. And so the conclusion you should come to is absolutely not that belief in God is required for doing good. That's simply untrue. Believers and non-believers do good and bad things all the time. Rather, the conclusion you should draw from this is that God is required for doing good. And that's because an objective standard of morality is required for there to be a good something. The reason is because without an objective standard of morality, there's not a standard of good by which things can be compared and called good. So from this thing we call conscience, which transcends all cultures, all societies, we can logically conclude that there is an actual objective standard of good. Therefore, this standard, in philosophical terms, would be omnibenevolent or infinitely objectively good. So in conclusion, from nothing more than mere logic and scientific observation, it can be determined that there is an omnipresent, supernatural, eternal, personal, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent something. And we Christians know him as God.